Well, hello guys, and welcome to today's video. In today's video, you're probably wondering why we're sitting on this screen. Well, if you guys checked out the title and the thumbnail, you'll know what's going on with today's video, because I did do a video like this for Modern Warfare, and you guys seem to enjoy that video a lot. Like, I had a lot of positive reviews, positive messages about that video. So I'm going to do that again here for Black Ops Cold War. And what I'm going to do is, first of all, if you guys didn't know, I made a video about Xbox Elite Controller Series 2 settings, specifically for Modern Warfare. I'm going to do the same thing specifically for Black Ops Cold War, whilst also revealing my Black Ops Cold War settings. Now, if you want to see my Black Ops Cold War settings, what I'm going to do at the end of this video, or in the comment section, if you guys don't have the Elite Controller, etc., because the first part I'm going to be showing you my settings for the Elite Controller and why I use them and everything, kind of discussing some things, because I've also changed a few things since Modern Warfare and since making that previous video I made. So I'm going to discuss my Elite Controller settings for those who do have an Elite Controller, and also those who might be wanting to buy an Elite Controller, might want to know what the controller's about, what it has to offer, and that's what I'm going to be doing first. But in the comment section I will leave a timestamp telling you when I go over my Black Ops Cold War settings for any of you guys who only came here for the Black Ops Cold War settings. So go into the comment section now, look for that timestamp if you guys are already looking for Black Ops Cold War settings. But for those of you who want to see some Elite Wireless Controller Series 2 and Series 1, I believe this works the same for Series 1 for some of these settings, because I believe it's the same software. Just stick around and we'll talk about my settings for Black Ops Cold War and basically any Call of Duty, okay? So now, some of these settings have changed since I last made my video, which was in Modern Warfare a couple of months ago now. But a few tips were given to me, especially from that video. Some people left comments telling me things that I could change to make my own settings better, and they worked out a treat. So let's get into it. Let's get into my controller settings. Now, as you can see, I've appropriately named it Call of Duty. If you guys didn't know, anyone who doesn't have an Elite Controller or doesn't know about it, you can create profiles and set them for specific things. So I have one for racing games that I haven't actually set to a profile yet. So currently, I have just the Call of Duty one at the moment. It's kind of obviously the primary game I'm playing at the moment. I am enjoying Black Ops Cold War to a degree. There are some things that annoy me at the moment. I do enjoy the game a lot more than Modern Warfare. So let's get into it. Let's talk about my settings. Now, as you can see, there's a lot of confusing things on here. You probably wonder what all this is. Now, this is all your buttons, where everything's set up. So as you can see, RT is RT, LT is LT. But the main things here, and this is the one thing I want to say, is the paddles, okay? Everything else, leave it as it is. Leave the buttons mapped to the same buttons they need to be. Leave the sticks mapped to where it needs to be. The paddles, okay? Now, some of you may use paddles with your Elite Controller. Some of you may not use paddles. Now, I currently use one paddle, right? It's still the same. I use the small paddle in the P2 section. So where P2 is labeled there, as you can see, is labeled A. And the reason for that is when I go to my Black Ops Cold War settings, somewhere at the end of this video or near towards the end of this video, I don't use stick to move anymore. I use just normal, the standard default, and A for me is jump. So having the A at P2 is important for me, as that allows me to jump and be able to jump shot in the middle of gunfights. Where you see these ones labeled P1, P3, and P4, I do not have set up, but they are currently mapped to X, B, and Y, but I only use one paddle currently, just because I believe personally the only thing you really need to have is to be able to jump shot. Obviously, there is a sliding mechanic, and some people have been doing things like slide cancelling. There are some weird ways to do it in that, but they are getting patched, so I personally don't believe there's any point learning any of the slide cancels that are in Black Ops Cold War currently. If you do, that's great, that's up to you, but personally, I don't think it's worth it, especially as Treyarch are working on patching those very quickly, so I don't feel that they're personally worth it in my opinion. So yeah, all I have is one paddle, which is in the P2 section for me. Again, this is something that's specifically for your choice. You can have 4 paddles if you want, 1 paddle, 2 paddles, 3 paddles. I believe this is personal choice, but I'm just letting you guys know what I do. Again, there is, obviously, if you guys have the Elite Controller, you'll know you have small paddles and long paddles. Don't be too worried about where you put the paddles. If you put the long paddle in P1, for instance, where even though it shows on here the small paddle, don't worry about it. It's about being comfortable for you. Make sure the paddles are in a comfortable position for you. I personally don't use the long paddle in the P2 section like it shows there, because for me, I have my second or third finger overlaying on top of the one finger I want to have on that paddle, and basically it leads me to accidentally click the paddle when I don't want to. So for me personally, I use a small paddle. It fits my middle finger perfectly on there, and I'm kind of just used to it now. I'm used to pressing just A and jump shotting. You guys know from my previous Modern Warfare video with the same. This is literally the same. I have not changed this. But if any of you guys new to like my videos or anything to do with like an Elite Controller setup, this is what I use. A button, P2 in the P2 section to jump shot in Black Ops Cold War. Next up, let's move on to the left stick and right stick. Okay, these are the exact same. You see the assignment is primary. Don't change that, leave it as is. Sensitivity curve. Now I've seen people mess around with these. You got different settings here. You got delayed, aggressive, instant, smooth, but they're not that great. Okay, honestly, I would much prefer, well, as you can see, I prefer using default. It's a more consistent feeling. I don't like delayed. Delayed just doesn't make any sense to me. Why would you want your thumbstick to be delayed? Aggressive, some people use this because they believe it gives you a more like instant, but as you can see, it'll be like behind and then it'll catch up, and it's just inconsistent in my opinion. As you can move that with the curve adjustment, make it more, impact you more early or impact it more later in the cycle. But for me personally, I use default. It's consistent, it's the typical thumbstick movement. You're used to where your thumbstick's going to be, and where you are moving your thumbstick is going to be where you want it to be. And then finally, this is the thing I do change, because I don't know what this is on default, I can't remember, but I have changed this to true diagonals. True diagonals for me just makes things more precise. As you can see, I'm rotating around now, doing it as slow as possible. You can see it's going around consistently. There's no like jolts or anything. Everywhere I'm moving, this is moving. Same with the right stick. Everywhere I move, it's moving with me at the same time. I can't actually show you from my hand, like I don't have a hand cam unfortunately, but just know guys, it is moving exactly where I'm telling it to move. So what you'll see if you use something like radial though, is it's more jagged. Can you see that? It just freezes a little bit. It's not smooth. You can see it like about there. It's just not as smooth. It's not as smooth as true diagonals. So for me personally, I use true diagonals. It's a more smooth, just easier and better. It's more precise. That is basically all it is to it. More precise. This is one of the biggest features that is very underrated on the Elite controller. And for me personally, I love using true diagonals. It's fantastic. Obviously, if you guys get the Elite controller and aren't used to this, make sure you go into bots and shoot some bots with this, because this is a different sensitivity. Like you're gonna feel it's a little bit more. It's more, how would I put it? It's not as fast. Okay, radial. When I use radial, it's a lot faster. Like you feel like your stick is more, the sensitivity of the stick is more aggressive. But with true diagonals, it's a lot more smoother. It's a lot slower. It's easier to comprehend and makes your shots a lot more crisp in my opinion. So I use true diagonals. Personally recommend this setting 110%. Make sure your calculation is set to true diagonals. Some of you might ignore this setting, but trust me, change it to true diagonals. You will not regret it. Next up, triggers. Now, this is something I didn't do on my Modern Warfare video because I didn't know exactly what the point of this was, to be honest, okay? I was someone who was new to Elite controllers and I just gave my settings because someone asked for my settings. But what I ended up finding out was from someone who put in the comment section, and his comment is tagged in that video, so thanks to that guy. I can't remember your name, but thank you to him, because basically what he told me was these settings are on 0 to 100. So this is all the way up at 100. Now, as you can see, I've got both of them set to 0 and 1. And the reason for that is, the moment I press the trigger, you can see I'm using the trigger. Now, I've got the trigger stops on. Now, I set them to full. Obviously, if you guys didn't know, the Elite controller has like a little button on the back that you can push up and down. All the way at the top makes it as loose as possible, where you can push all the way down. Or you can set it to the bottom saying that makes it so the trigger has very little movement. Like it basically doesn't move at all. And on that saying, I'm barely pressing the the trigger at all, and as you can see, I'm making a press like instant. It's pretty much instant. Same with the left side, it's instant. It's instantaneous. I am making a full press with the smallest little press. If you set this to 0 and 100, like so I'm going to do now. Now this is going to take a while, so bear with me here because it's got to get all the way up to 100 on the left trigger. Now you can see it takes a while. It takes a while. Like that. Now I do have it not set to the fullest trigger. If I set it to the bottom trigger, it still takes me a while. There's a little bit of a way to go. As you can see, I can still try to press it as little as possible. But if I set this all the way back down to 0, like you guys saw a second ago, you're gonna see it's an instantaneous press. I've instantly hit a full press. So let's take it for Black Ops Cold War, for instance, like the video is about today. I would be instantly aiming down sight. There's no delay in between me aiming down sight. That's me aiming down sight right there, instantly. Same with shooting, pressing the full trigger, getting a full press, instant response. No delay, no nothing. So make sure you set these to 0 and 1. Click the mirror trigger as well. If you set this one to 0 and 1, click the mirror trigger and it'll instantly change the right trigger to 0 and 1 for you. And yeah, make sure you have this set to this, because having these having an instant response is massively important. It'll save you a few milliseconds in gunfights. Being able to, for instance, if you're using something like I don't know, a semi-auto for instance, you want to be hitting that trigger as quick as possible, and as you can see, you can hit it pretty quickly. So yeah, definitely change these to 0 and 1. Very important setting, and thank you to whoever said that on the last video. Massively helped me out, and is a massively underrated setting on the Xbox Elite controller. Next up, vibration. Some of you guys might like having vibration, okay? It makes you feel immersed and in the game, but personally, this is something I have set to the absolute minimum, okay, to basically 0, because why would you want your controller rumbling around your hand? It's going to make your shot shaky. If your controller's rumbling around in your hand, you're not going to be sturdy with the controller. Your arms, your hands are going to be moving all over the place because your controller's moving about in your hands. You want to be able to have the same feeling and same precise movement in every gunfight, every consistent like aim response, everything. And having the controller rumbling around, moving in your hands is not going to help that situation. So I highly recommend changing these vibration settings to the absolute minimum. If you're someone who likes playing racing games, or you're playing like a campaign, you want to be immersed, fair enough, put these settings on. But personally, turn these settings off. Don't have vibration on. It is not good. It does not help in gunfights. I can't see any reason why you should have this on when playing Call of Duty, and specifically Black Ops Cold War in this case. Next up, brightness. I have it set to the minimum. I don't know why. It's not really an important thing. And that's about it, guys. That is really it. That is all there is to the Elite controller. A few things I'll say. So if you want to know what thumbsticks and stuff I'm using, the D-pad doesn't really matter. I'm not actually using the D-pad that you see on the screen there. Not that that matters for Black Ops Cold War. Again, there's not really any importance to the D-pad. But for me, I am using the low concave thumbstick, which if you guys didn't know is the one which is... It's like the domed one. So on the left stick, I have the short domed one, which is, it's got like 3 spirals in it. I don't know how to best describe it without showing an image or anything. I can't actually do that in this video, unfortunately. But it's a domed thumbstick. It has 3 rings in it. That's the left thumbstick. And on the right thumbstick, I have the standard Xbox thumbstick. But I do use Control Freaks, and I'm not sponsored, but I will say this. Control Freaks do massively help, in my opinion. I do love their products. And I am currently using a Black Ops 4 heightened thumbstick, okay? It's a very high thumbstick. So I do have, basically, if you guys have the Elite, with the Elite controller, you know you get a high thumbstick. The reason I don't use that one, it's just not as precise, it's not as grippy. And because it's not got a larger circle, like my thumb slips off of it quite easily. And doesn't really fit on there perfectly. Whereas with the Control Freak, I have the Black Ops 4 Control Freak. My thumb sits on it perfectly, and it's about the same height as the the tool stick you get with the Xbox Elite controller. But personally, I use the Xbox standard stick on the right with my Control Freak on top of it. So basically, I do have a low stick on the left and a high stick on the right. Now again, this is personal preference, what you want, because obviously everyone's got different size hands, different size thumbs, different size fingers. It's going to be personal preference in this situation. But for me, low stick on the left, high stick on the right. Personally, I think everyone should try to learn that, because with having a higher stick on the right side, you get more precise movement. You get more the ability to be able to be more precise with your shots. You get basically a more fuller circle, more fuller motion, and just a lot more precise movements in those gunfights when you need it most. For instance, at distance, when you need to make micro adjustments, you're going to need to be able to make those very slight adjustments. And with with a smaller stick, you can't make those precise adjustments that you need. I believe there's a video by Control Freak that explains this very well, which you guys should definitely check out, because it does explain it very well. The difference between having a tool stick on the right thumbstick and having a low thumbstick on the right stick. And finally, the last thing I'll talk about is, as I said earlier, about the trigger stops. Trigger stops, for me, what I have them set to is on the left thumbstick, I have it set to the loosest option. Because it's aimed down sight, all I need to do is just press it a little and it will do it anyway. And plus, having it set to the fullest, I don't know why, it just hurt my fingers a little bit. Again, this is personal preference here again. But I definitely recommend on the right trigger, which is going to be your trigger for shooting, for instance, when you're firing like a semi-auto, that, make sure you have your trigger stop on. Make sure you have it to the fullest setting. Make sure it's as minimum as possible, because when you're firing like something like a semi-auto, for instance, you want to be hitting that trigger as quick as possible and having less like force to push down, basically. Even though you've got the 0-1 setting that we spoke about with the triggers, make sure you have it set to the minimum, because what that means is you're not going to be pushing down as much, and you're not going to have as much like movement to do to make sure that you're pressing the trigger. And yeah, so those are my Xbox Elite controller settings for Black Ops Cold War. Basically almost the same for Modern Warfare with a few minor adjustments, but for any of you guys who are new to Xbox Elite and stuff, or thinking of buying an Xbox Elite controller, it's a fantastic controller. I will give one little warning, which is I did have to send this back one time because I did unfortunately pick up stick drift. This was something I announced on my Twitter as well, that I was having issues actually trying to get to be able to send off the Elite controller. But when the if you get an Elite controller that doesn't have this fault, again, they did replace it for free for me, so thank you to Xbox for doing that. But I do believe that's because they updated the warranty because of certain situations. For instance, Nintendo got sued for having a dead zone issue that they knew about with their Switch controller, I believe. But on the Xbox Elite, you do get like a 1-year warranty now, so it is worth it in my opinion. It's a fantastic controller with, for instance, here the software is amazing. A lot of thumbstick customization, D-pad customization. You have the ability to take off the the back buttons if you need to, the back paddles if you want to. You can have paddles, you can have no paddles, you can have one paddle. It's up to you. There's just a lot to the Xbox Elite controller that I personally love about it, and I highly recommend it. It's a fantastic controller in my opinion. Very expensive controller, but a very worth it controller in my opinion. So yeah, that concludes the Xbox Elite controller segment of this video. I will now be moving on to the Black Ops Cold War segment of the video, where I'm going to be going over my settings for Black Ops Cold War and explaining why I use my setting, what settings I use, and why I use them. So yeah, hope you enjoyed this segment of the video, and we'll be moving on to the next segment where I discuss my Black Ops Cold War settings. So see you in the next segment. Right, welcome back guys, and welcome to the next segment of today's video, which some of you guys may have only come here for, which is great. This is the part of the video you want to be at, which is my Black Ops Cold War settings, and discussing with you why I'm using these settings and giving like recommendations as to what settings you should be using. Because I will like start by stating this now, you don't have to use the exact settings I'm using, but I will give you an opinion about why I use my settings and the reason why you should use them in certain ranges, for instance sensitivity, dead zones, etc. I'm going to like explain that in this segment right now. So yeah, let's get into it. Let's talk about my Black Ops Cold War settings. We'll start off instantly with the controller, okay? Now, if you're PC players, I don't have any PC binds and stuff. This is specifically for mainly Xbox, but there is PlayStation as well. If you PlayStation users might be interested in these settings, but here it is. You can see my horizontal and vertical stick is at 5.5, okay? Now, I personally believe you can play anywhere between 5 and 8. Now, there'll be some of you out there who'll sit there and say, you can play at 14, which is fantastic. If you can do that, perfect. But you got to make sure that you're, like, not kidding yourself, okay? Playing at higher sensitivity doesn't make you a better player. What makes you a better player is being accurate in your gunfights. So, make sure that you're being accurate. Don't play on a 14 sensitivity because you think you need to be able to spin around in circles as quick as possible when aimed on sight. What matters is more important is being able to hit your shots. It's great if you can react to a gunfight quicker than someone, but if you can't keep your shot consistent, if you're hitting 1 bullet and the other guy's hitting 4 bullets on you, the other person's going to win unless you're using a sniper maybe or something. You know, with snipers it's a little bit different. You might want to bump that sensitivity up. But personally, anywhere between a 5 and an 8 is a good sensitivity for Cold War. You could even play on a 4 probably. So yeah, I'd say between a 4 and an 8 is a good sensitivity. Now here's another option that I've been using, which is the ADS stick sensitivity. For me personally, 0.9 has felt like the perfect spot. This is something that again is all personal preference. Move this around, and if you guys didn't know, there is actually something that it doesn't tell you. As you can see, it doesn't say anywhere that you can actually change the number more specifically. You just get this, it goes to 1, 0.9, 0.8. If you guys hit X or square, you can actually change the value. So right now, I'll change it to say 0.95. As you can see, it does change to 0.95. I don't know why it's like this. It doesn't actually tell you that you can do this. But for me, on Xbox, that's X, which I don't know, I believe on PlayStation is square or something. Whatever the left button is for you guys, make sure, you know, you give that a whirl around, you know, mess around with it. But for me, I like 0.9. It just works perfectly for me. ADS stick sensitivity for the high zoom, I personally keep it 1. This is basically about being able to drag scope and stuff, and this is for scopes, as you can see, with a zoom of over 4 times, which for most things like assault rifles or SMGs, you're not really going to be using a scope over 4 times. Maybe with tac rifles you might, maybe with semi-autos, and with snipers though, you're obviously good. Most of the time you're going to be using over a 4 times scope. So yeah, I personally keep that at 1. It allows me to drag scope. It keeps up with the target. Make sure when you have this setting, make sure that you're keeping up with the target. That's one thing I'll say. When choosing your like sensitivity, make sure that you're able to keep on track of the target and you're not overcompensating as well. So make sure it's perfect basically. Make sure that when you're drag scoping, you're not overcompensating and you're not too slow. If someone's running and you can't keep up with them, you need to bump that sensitivity up a little bit. You know, I mean, it might be the stick sensitivity, it might be the actual vertical and horizontal stick sensitivity. You make sure, just mess around in bots. That's what I'll say. You need to get your fine-tune your settings. Make sure you practice against bots. Practicing against bots, you know, there's nothing bad about it. There's nothing like, oh, he's playing against bots, so that means he's bad. You need to go somewhere to practice your settings. And if you go straight online, you're going to be messing around with sensitivity every game, and you're just not going to get better at the game, okay? You're going to be struggling, you're going to be complaining that you're dying, and it's not going to help you out. So go into bots, mess around, shoot 100, 200, maybe even 1,000 bots if you need to, until you're absolutely perfectly in sync and you just feel like you're hitting your shots. So yeah, that's when what I'll preface about, well, say about that. Next up, button layout. I've got this on default because me having the Xbox Elite controller, I can use the paddles and I don't really want to mess around with anything. If you guys don't have an Elite controller or don't have any controller with paddles, I personally believe stick and move is one of the best options, because I believe jump shotting is a fantastic thing and it's something that you need to learn in Call of Duty. It helps out massively in gunfights. I know some people hate the fact that people jump shot in gunfights and stuff, but it is useful and it's something that I feel like you should learn. So stick to move, what this does is, as you can see, your right thumbstick becomes the jump button. So when you're in a gunfight, you can jump and keep your hand on the thumbstick and be able to still shoot at the same time and be able to aim, like move your aim around. Whereas if you have it on default and you don't have any paddles, you're going to be, you can't, basically you have to press A to jump, and pressing A takes your thumb off the thumbstick, unless you have some like weird way of holding the controller. You know, some people hold the controllers in different ways, but if you're playing the normal way where you have the thumbstick, your thumb on the left thumbstick and your right thumb on the right thumbstick, you have to move your thumb off there to press A, and that means you can't adjust your aim in the middle of jump shotting. You have to go back onto the thumbstick. It kind of like, you're kind of just jumping for no reason really at that point. That's in my opinion. So personally, if you don't have paddles, I would change this setting to stick to move. But if not, and you have the Elite controller, change to the settings that I said at the beginning of the video and keep this on default to make sure that the A button is still jump and that paddle is still mapped to the jump button. Flip, some people do this on PlayStation. I believe that's because the bottom triggers aren't that great on the PlayStation. I don't know. Not sure about the PS5 controller. I've not actually seen much about it. Things like the rumbles and stuff I've heard about, but haven't heard too much about the thumbsticks, the triggers on the back. Sorry, but yeah, invert vertical look. Some people change this. I personally don't. Next up, aim response curve type. Now this is important. This is something they added to the game about a week ago now, a couple of days ago, something like that. This is important. This is the same thing for Modern Warfare, and it's the same thing again. Okay, standard is good, linear is okay, but dynamic is, in my opinion, the best aim response curve type. It's just very precise. As you can see, reverse S curve mapping for fine aim control, faster initial response that smooths out with higher stick deflection. This makes it so it's very precise. Like this here, standard is quick. Standard is like the normal like aim to stick rate where it gets faster over time. This, however, dynamic is just very precise. It starts off quite slow, but it goes instantly fast. I know it says faster initial response that smooths out with higher stick deflection, but it's just a more smoother response. That's how I put it. Like, you can make those micro adjustments that you need to make in those gunfights. So personally, have it on dynamic, fantastic option. Get used to that setting. Again, shoot some bots, fantastic setting. Next up, controller vibration. I disabled anyway. Even though it's disabled on controller, I still set this to disabled anyway. Aim down sight, aim assist, make sure this is on. There's no reason to explain. There's no reason you shouldn't have that on. Same with slowdown and strafing, aim assist. Make sure these are on. There's no reason to turn these off whatsoever. One of these I don't believe actually affects multiplayer, which I believe is this one, but I have it on anyway. It's quite useful for zombies in my opinion. If you play zombies. Airborne mantle behavior. Now, this is something I'll discuss. I've set this to manual, which is mantle by pressing the jump button only. Now, what this means is when I jump, it's only going to do it when I press the jump. But the problem is sometimes it randomly mantles near things, so I don't know if I should be changing this really on second press, but I've tried using on second press and it makes it harder to actually get through places that you could normally jump through without mantling. So personally, I use just manual and grounded mantle behavior on press. That's just how I believe it. I found the best setting for it, in my opinion. Aim down sight behavior is hold, steady aim behavior is hold, armor behavior apply 1. This isn't really important unless you play, what's that mode called? Can't even remember, called Dirty Bomb. I haven't actually played that mode that much in this game. Not a big fan of it. I just don't like the whole spawning in and being killed behind and having people on you. It's not great in my opinion. Some of you might like it. That's up to you if you enjoy it. Next up, attack vehicle control mode. I don't believe I've changed this. I don't really have an issue or feel like there's any need to change this. But it's up to you what you want this on. You can even have alternate or aim based. But I like to have my gun out. I don't want to be going around in tanks or boats. Next up, this is important, okay? Some of you guys might not know what this setting is. Some of you guys may know what the setting is. This is a very important setting because this here, which is what I'm discussing here, the left stick mid input and the right stick mid input, is very important. Now, I believe on default, depending if you're on PC as well or console. On console, I believe this is set to 10. And on PC, I believe it's actually set to 20. So if you're on PC, make sure you're changing this setting down. This setting needs to go down, okay? If you have it on 20, basically what this means is you're getting no input for a good, like, couple of milliseconds. There is no input from your controller. You're going to have to push your thumbstick as quite far out to be able to get an input. This is the amount of time in between an input. So say for instance you move your thumbstick to the right and you get no input, that might mean your thumbstick, your input is just too high. And say if you have it at like 10 or something, you're going to feel delayed. Like it's going to feel delayed in the gunfight. You're going to be wondering, why is my aim not moving? That's because you've got your thumbstick too high. And the other thing with this as well is making sure you set this not so it's too low, because obviously everyone will probably be sitting there thinking, oh, why didn't I just put it on 0 then? If you put it on 0 and you have a controller that's say quite old or a controller that's not that great, you're going to be getting stick drift, and stick drift is one of the worst things you could have in a gunfight. Basically what stick drift is your thumbstick will be basically making movement without you actually touching the thumbstick. So say you're about to aim at someone and you've got this set to 0, but you have stick drift on your controller, and it's quite aggressive stick drift, your aim's going to be going to the left, and you're going to be wondering why when you haven't actually touched anything yet. You're trying to like set up and just hold your aim, but your thumbstick's making you go all the way to the left. And even then, even if you push to the right, you're having to counteract the fact that your controller's going all the way to the left. So you need to push all the way to the right just to get it back to where you want it to be. So make sure you have this set to an appropriate level. I personally go into bots and, you know, stand still and just leave your aim. Actually set your sensitivity to the highest setting, and then change this to as low as possible. What you want this to be is as low as possible without any movement on the thumbstick. If you see movement on your screen when you have this setting on, that means you've got it too low. You need to set it higher and higher until eventually, when you're standing still and you've just left your gun like aimed down sight or something, there's no movement. There's absolutely no movement on the screen. Your character model is not moving around, is not looking at one place or another. It's just dead center, looking at where it needs to be looking. So yeah, that's my personal opinion on that. Make sure you have that set to a good setting. But for me, 5.5 is great in my opinion. It's just the best setting for me. Auto move forward disabled, auto sprint disabled. You can have these on if you want to, but I don't actually prefer these settings. It just feels weird to me. I tried using these settings. I tried messing around with them. Just didn't like these settings. They weren't for me basically. Rest of these not really that important. Equipment behaviors hold, because I like to, you know, be able to hold, for instance, to cook a frag grenade, etc. But yeah, that's the most important settings really is there for the controller. Next up, we'll move on to the graphics. Now this is something I didn't discuss in my Modern Warfare video, and I forgot how important this was. But this here, some of you get this, you will get this when you load up the game for the first time, which is the safe area adjustment. And some of you will probably set this to the widest possible setting. Now the reason I've got this set to the most minimum setting is because you want everything to be on your screen. You want the minimap, you want the HUD, you want everything to be on your screen. So having it as centered to as minimum as possible means it's more central on the screen, meaning you don't have to look away as much from like actually where your gun, basically where you're trying to aim, to look at the minimap. You know, with the minimap, we obviously have red dots this year. You know, thank God for that. Cheers, Treyarch. We've got red dots back on the minimap. Fantastic. Should never have went. But to be able to look at the minimap and you set it to the furthest option, the minimap's going to be all the way up in the left corner. So you're going to have to look from your gun all the way up, like actually tilt your head, or like turn your head up to the left. Instead of doing that, set this to the minimum option, like the absolute minimum, and the minimap will be as close as possible to where your gun is, to the point where you could probably just take a quick glance and go straight back to looking at your weapon and looking where you want to be looking on the screen to spot enemies, which makes things a lot better. You know, you're not having to look away, because the moment you look away, an enemy might appear on your screen, but you won't see them because you've got like tunnel vision and you are looking at the minimap and not where you want to be aiming. So yeah, definitely have this on the minimum option. I see too many people have this on the widest option, and it's just not a good option. Colorblind modes, this is personal preference. I haven't done anything with this. I don't believe the colorblind types actually help in this game, in my opinion. They haven't been helpful for me. I believe I used Deuteranopia in Modern Warfare, but in this game, didn't really help me. But definitely, if I were you guys, mess around with these settings here. Change the colors to the colors you want to see. You know, I like this red more than I do that red there. I believe I don't know if that's red or orange. I can't actually tell the difference, but I like this color more. So I've messed around with these colors a little bit. I think, yeah, this one here, that's the only one I really changed. Oh, and the party color. Changed it to purple. I just prefer my party members to be in purple. And yeah, next up, brightness. I set this to 50. It just worked very well for my monitor. This is all personal preference again. Make sure your brightness is not all the way up. There's no reason. It doesn't make people more visible. It doesn't help, okay? It makes actually the colors all washed out, and it's just not great. So set this to a brightness that is appropriate. In my opinion, anywhere between 45 and 50 is normally about a good option. Next up, split screen orientation. That's up to you. This here, now this is grayed out for me, but highly recommend, if you guys have this option available, the 120 Hz refresh rate, make sure you have this enabled. There is no reason to not be playing this game on 120 FPS if you have the option to do so. Now, the only reason I don't have the option at the moment is due to my capture card. I do actually have a 144 Hz monitor to play this game, but currently can't take use of this function because of my capture card. Because the capture card I'm using is an Elgato HD60S, it limits me to only playing at 1080p 60, so I can't even use HD either at the moment, but I am working on that. I am looking at getting a capture card that allows me to pass through 120 FPS and allow me to play in like maybe 4K, I don't know, probably 1440p at the best, but when I get this option available, I will be taking full advantage of this option because you guys should be using this if you have this option available 110%. Next up, field of view. Personal preference here, okay? Now I've got mine set at 100. It's just the sweet spot for me. This does affect things like your aim and that as well, so you definitely want to get this to a position where basically you can see the enemy, but it also doesn't affect your aim too much because it does make your aim feel a little bit different, you know? You're going to feel a little more zoomed in if you're on, say, 80, and you're going to feel a lot more like distance at 100. And obviously this setting here also does affect this as well. Some people like independent, they like to actually be like really zoomed into the scope. For me personally, I like affected. I like the gun to be like center on my screen, not in my face when I'm aiming down sight. It's just not something I prefer. But yeah, make sure you get this setting right, okay? Anywhere between 80 and 100, but I would definitely, if you have something like an Xbox Series X, for instance, I have an Xbox Series X, I have this set to 100, plays perfectly for me. You can have it set to 120 if you want to, but if you're not spotting enemies and you're having issues, I would change the setting back down to like 100 or something, because having the screen like widened out and like more zoomed out is going to make it harder for you to see enemies at those further distances. They won't be as visible basically, and this game does have a bit of visibility issues, so make sure you have this set to an appropriate setting. Next up, ray tracing. I have this disabled just because it's very glitchy in this game at the moment. Some maps it works well, it works normal, and it does make the game look a lot better. But sometimes it just glitches my game, for instance. I don't know if it's just an issue that the Treyarch needs to fix, but it doesn't make the game like consistent. It makes my game like FP like lag a little bit. It's not great in my opinion, so I personally have this disabled. If you like the look of the game and it doesn't actually affect your console that bad, definitely enable it. But for me personally, I have disabled it, and the same with this motion blur. Do not use this. Make sure this is disabled. You do not want to be having motion blur whilst you are spinning, moving, etc., because then you just won't see anyone. It will be very blurry and you can't see anything. Next up, audio. Personally, if you want to hear in gunfights, just turn the music volume down. That's all I'm going to say. If you like the music, set it to about 20 or something if you do like hearing the music. But currently, until they add that classic Black Ops 1 music or something, I'm not having this music on, okay? I don't know why they removed, I believe they removed it, but yeah. And the next setting here, audio preset, high boost. Make sure it's on high boost. It's the best setting for sound whoring. It's the easiest one to hear footsteps in my opinion. So yeah, make sure you set that to high boost. It's the easiest setting for hearing people's footsteps. The rest of this doesn't really matter. Interface, again, I haven't changed any of this, so leave that as it is in my opinion. Keyboard and mouse, not an issue, and then account network, I'm not going to show that just in case it shows my IP. But yeah, that is it. That is it for today's video. These are my settings for Black Ops Cold War, and obviously I have went through my Xbox Elite controller settings at the start of the video. But yeah, I hope you guys learned something from this video. I hope you guys enjoy my run through the settings. Now, sorry there's no gameplay or anything, and this is probably going to be a very long video, but you guys did like it last time when I went into full detail about everything that I made, like my settings, why I use them, and what you should be using, or giving you an opinion as to what you should be using and how you should be like doing things and why I do them. But I hope you enjoyed this settings video. I hope this helps you out. Again, you don't have to use the exact settings I'm using. I've given you some opinions about like horizontal and vertical stick sensitivity, about whereabouts your aim should be and how you should be like looking to make sure your aim is better. But once you've done all these settings, the best thing to do is to make sure you go and play bots, okay? Go shoot some bots, make sure your aim is crisp, make sure all the settings that you have changed after this video are good for you, okay? If some of my settings don't work for you, I'm sorry, sometimes it just works that way. These settings are the best settings for me personally, and I believe are the best settings in the game, really, you know? But for some of you guys, it might not work. That doesn't mean my settings are terrible, but that means you've got to work on it and mess around with a few things and see what works best for you, okay? But this is more of a guide to help you get started, help you like get used to whereabouts your aim should be and what settings you should be having on and what settings you should be having off and what should be doing this and what should be doing that. But yeah, I hope you enjoyed today's video. I hope this helps you out a ton. Anyone with Elite Controller, I hope this helps out when setting up the Elite Controller. It can be a bit confusing at the start and not knowing what things do. And I hope for anyone who's mainly came to this video for Black Ops Cold War settings, I hope some of these settings have helped you out, because some of you guys may be struggling with the aim assist, maybe it being too strong for you, too little, with your aim being all over the place. I hope these settings help you out, and yeah, I hope you enjoyed today's video. If you did, leave a comment, leave a like, subscribe with notifications on, and I'll catch you guys in the next video. Goodbye!